Hello, and welcome to Story Hour. My name is Rebecca Gomez Farrell, and I am your guest host for the evening. I am an author and a food and drink blogger, and I am here because the amazing Laura Blackwell, who is one of the co-organizers of Story Hour, couldn't be here tonight, so I'm filling in. What is Story Hour? Well, during the pandemic, the illuminary Daniel Marcus, let's call him, uh, decided that we needed something to bring us together virtually. And so he turned to one of those oldest human traditions, which is telling stories around, for us, a virtual campfire. And you know what? It's been super successful, and lots of people have shared amazing stories. And so Daniel and Laura have kept it going for the past 6 years, which I think is amazing. Um, every story hour is on Wednesdays at 7 p.m. and it is recorded live on Zoom. And then we share it on YouTube later on so you can watch the replay. And there are always two writers who are reading their own work during story hour. Tonight's readers are Somto Ihezue and Gordon B. White. But before I turn things over to them to entice us with their tales, I actually have my very own short horror story tonight. It is titled Allergies. At any given moment, my voice may go hoarse and slither out of the room and disappear. Any second, a loud cough may resound and rattle all of us to our cores. If these things happen, you have my apologies. Um, I would also like to welcome back our returning audiences to the Zoom room if you're here with us on Zoom, and also to anyone who is new and returning who will be watching this recording on YouTube later on as well. You are welcome to, on Zoom, leave comments in the chats about what you're hearing, and on YouTube to also leave comments as you listen to a replay. I think a lot of people don't actually realize how much it means to authors to hear responses to our work. So it's amazing to get any sort of feedback for us to know that something that we are reading to you, telling you, resonates with you. So if it does, let us know. I think that that's actually all we need to do to get the ball rolling. So get the beverage of your choice. I am having brewed cacao tonight. Sit back, relax, and we will begin with Gordon B. White.
Right, I forgot I got to unmute myself.
You did it.
Yeah, I did. I'm getting there. All right. So I'm going to read to you a story today from a recent anthology, 2025's The Joining: Scenes of Wedding Terror from Crystal Lake Publishing, edited by Jacob Stephen Moore. Um, One thing I have to tell you about my story is it's a little bit unique, and this will come across as I read it, in that it is all one sentence. So uh, yeah, it's a 4,000 word sentence, but just one sentence. So I've had people walk in the middle and go, "Oh, I thought you just didn't know how to read properly." I do. I know you take a breath at a period, but I will tell you now, there is only one period in this. So this is called Speak Now or. Speak now or. Aye, says a young woman, a stranger to the townspeople assembled for the wedding. Her dark hair bound with a green ribbon into a single thick braid, which she casts over her shoulder to sway like a serpent as she rises from the pew to continue. I'll speak now, as you asked, for I have a reason why these two before you should not be wed. And at her proclamation, the crowd begins to murmur, and not the least of them is the young bride's gray-bearded father, Herman Gorglut, the owner of the village mill, who lays a heavy glance first on his daughter, Agnes, and then at the groom, Aidan Haller, who before today was an inveterate bachelor and is Mr. Gorglut's longtime business partner's heir. But the unfamiliar woman with the dark hair raises her voice above the dull grumbles to continue, reminding those assembled in this humble chapel that for 3 Sundays running now, the church has read aloud the banns of marriage and made the coming nuptials known throughout the parish, as is only right and done by custom, so that word was spread of the impending marriage, and that the point of disseminating that information is so that any lawful or moral challenges may be brought forth on the wedding day itself. And I, the woman says, have such a challenge, for you see, they should not be married. No union between these two, bride and groom, may be formed, because such a bond has already been formed with another. But the gathered families and neighbors balk and bark at this, and young Agnes Goreglut blushes, a vibrant bloody red seeping across the fair face of the comely blonde girl, barely a woman. For although on further inspection she could perhaps be of a similar age as the coarse stranger with the dark hair, who was just now objected to her wedding, right at the moment before the nervous groomsman, Mr. Haller, no, her husband to be, Aidan, is to be pronounced her keeper before God and man and her parents, the obligations for and all rights to her body and estate to be transferred to him. It is the contrasting boldness of the woman protesting that gives her a maturity that poor Agnes, even now on her day of marriage, seems to lack, and so makes her appear all the more childish beside. But the protester continues, again raising her voice to be heard over the spreading din, and she is nearly shouting now. I tell you that one before you has made a compact with the devil, and made it on the last full moon, not even 4 weeks past. And if this woman perhaps meant to cow or stupefy the congregation by invoking the devil of all beings, then she is sorely mistaken. For half the men and most of the women and all of the children are caught up in the fervent babbling, so that as one they begin to rise, like the river that runs through the village when the spring thaw comes late to the westernmost mountains, and the snow that has been waiting, building above the tree line beyond the village, melts and returns as furious water with a vivid rush and crush, barely hemmed in by the banks, and the crowd's momentum is assuming the very nature of just such a once in a century flood that could sweep away the mill's wheel and the very mill itself, not to mention the miller or his business partner or his daughter the bride or the unfamiliar woman with the dark braid bound with green silk. Did not the priest behind the pulpit, stern Father Chrisman, frosty brows arched and wild like the snow-covered evergreens atop those same mountain ridges before the drifts melt in the spring, thunder down upon all those assembled to be quiet for heaven's sake, be quiet and be seated, and show respect for the sanctity of the church and the ceremony of the wedding, because, as he continues, once the crowd bows its collective head like a chastised child and sinks back to their seats, the purpose of him asking for any reasons as to why these two should not be wed is, as the dark haired woman has correctly stated, to hear such challenges. And what challenge, he asks them, could be greater? What challenge transcends mere earthly objections, such as age or consent or even prior marriages before the church, than involvement with the devil? Since that one is, of course, the great foe and the ever present threat to life and soul and community and prosperity. And the crowd murmurs, Amen, in a reflex like a gasp, and it is so, which gives the woman with the dark braid, who is among all of them the only one still standing, and who has not yet sat down, nor now even looks as if she could, so rigid and righteous is her posture, a chance to speak again. And so she begins afresh by telling the assembled crowd that the story I am here to tell you is true, but not for the faint of heart, as it involves an encounter at the witch's sabbat. And she pauses for the collective grumble and allows it to bubble out, relieving pressure like a lid lifted from a pot on the hearth, but proceeds with her tale before it can boil over into an interruption. Aye, she continues, a witch's sabbat that I observed on the night of the full moon, not even 1 month past, as it took place on the open fields between this village, with its fine and profitable mill to the west, and the garrison outpost of soldiers to the east, on those fields in which on summer's nights dance the mere heath sprites and hag's fire, the wispy willow come down nows and wild hide your bones jacky, but which, when the autumn sets in, and the great swaths of golden wheat and barley are scythed down for the harvest, and the nights grow long and cool and lumpen, and the trees shed the modest flesh of their leaves to claw with many fingers at the tumescent moon in the otherwise empty sky above those fields, which are known to host the Sabbath, yes, that very same celebration of witches, warlocks, demons, devils, familiars, flambos, imps, incubi, succubi, steal the bread sisters. Father Christman coughs to urge the woman onward, and she nods. For on those nights, as all the good and God-fearing among you know, those fields are marked with bonfires out in the distance, and woe be to the traveler who stumbles across one of their gatherings, and especially, as it was not even 1 month back, one who has the misfortune to do so on a full moon, for those are the nights during which the entire cotillion of the devil and his friends and lovers and servants and allies come to make merry. And such a full moon was, of course, above the field that night when I saw the truth as to why this couple should not be wed. For you must understand, good people, I myself had been waylaid, coming down from the mountains and passing by your town, heading towards the garrison in the east to visit my brother, who was many months ago pressed into service, and for whom I sought to make an appeal for his early discharge from conscription. When I found myself crossing those fields at night, and almost without intending to, found myself pulled to just outside the ring of light of one of those pillars of fire that beckons across the darkness, arriving in the midst upon such a scene of debauchery and decadence, already in full and riotous bloom like the most indecent of flowers, believe as you will or not, but which I could see, in fact, was not merely a feast and festival, but a wedding. Yes, a wedding, but not like the proper and holy one before you now, but one instead that was a rebuke of this church and the Lord the cloisters within. And of the two before you, bride and groom, I saw that one of them was not only in attendance, but by the end even approached the devil himself to beseech his hand in marriage, although not at first. For at first, the one before you was, as I was, seemingly taken aback by the sheer spectacle on display of all sorts of strange types of affections. A murmur and a gasp again rises from the audience here, the room growing uncomfortable warm as the moist breath and blushing bodies swelter. And Father Christman loosens the yellowed collar of his cassock and tries to shush them, but the young woman with the dark braid does not stop. Oh, yes, my friends, affections and displays, the kind of which would make your ears burn, and moreover your souls beside, you must believe, such as, for instance, I saw the devil himself wearing a black frock coat and surrounded by his warlocks, bend over to put his horns toward his hooves, and then reach back around to spread himself from behind, only for an imp to insert a black candle in between the devil's fundament, halfway. And with a laugh, the wick caught fire, and the devil hopped up and down, and then the warlocks all gathered around, laughing, and also inserted such candles, but smaller, into their own fundaments. And then one by one would approach the devil back to back and bend over, heads between knees, to touch fundaments together and thereby light their candles off the devil's wick, some flames of which were then passed to other demons, or to warlocks, or to a few of the curious witches who had joined them, so that from fundament to fundament the devil's ember was passed around, and the revelers scampered and squealed in such delight as their candles batted into one another, and the hot black wax dripped on their haunches, until the skipping glimpses of light and the sound of their merriment floated across the fields to where a greater mass of witches gathered unperturbed, focused as they were on lacquering one another with untold ointments and magical salves, smearing themselves and their oils across one another's bodies, their bosoms and stomachs, and down across their hips and thighs, glistening in the firelight when they danced close to the flames, and then in the moonlight when their reel took them away, so that every curve or soft surface was but one ripple of the aspect of the swollen lunar dominion above them. And though their limbs were entwined, their feet and legs began to lift off the ground, and they writhed and swam up into the air, gasping with the cool night air. And here the bride herself begins to swoon beneath the weight of her starched gown and the heat. But the groom, pale face drained of blood, lets her dip to her knees while his own hands clutch the waist of his vest and pull it down so tightly that the seams are beginning to separate the shoulders. And the strange young woman, seeing this, waves her hand forward as if to skip past all the lascivious details of the human and non-human flesh and non-flesh that, whether despite of or because of its periods, marks the most engaged that certain members of the audience have yet been in any part of the ceremony so far, twisting and writhing in their seats, and which also marks the readiest contrast between the devil's riotous wedding being described and the cramped, fusty affair before them. But I diverge too much, the woman says, and risk bearing the heart of my tale. Because there, after hours of such dancing and feasting and such, let us say only that with the cornucopia of thrills nearly exhausted from the devil's wicker horn, and the attendees duly worn and weary, is when the actual wedding ceremony began. The devil sat down on a throne of living oak, still in his frock coat, but now able to rest his backside on the seat since the candle twixt his fundament had long since melted down and been peeled off by a demon with a horse's face to great giggles of delight. And there, resting on his throne with one hand pointed to the sky and the other to the ground, the witches, warlocks, imps, incubi, succubi, satyrs, fauns, demons, dirges, ghosts, goblins, ghouls, and all the rest, all gathered in a line and one by one made their way to the devil to kiss his hands, then his lips, before saying, I thee wed. As one and again and the next, they all committed themselves to that one who dwells below, the one who flaunts the mores of the church and laughs away the duty of family and casts off the chains of state. And then from him they went back to their fires, resuming their feasting and dancing and singing and coupling and thruppling and other joinings, as if the wedding to the great deceiver meant nothing more to them than a passing fancy, so very the opposite of what we see here. Although it could be, too, that what that commitment to the devil meant to them was a commitment of some other kind to an idea bigger than just the personage of the devil himself. The congregants now are sweating profusely, the very wood of the pews seeming to warp beneath their broiling wool and linen rears, the musk of marinating human bodies beginning to overtake the defeated bridal flowers. And the woman stops herself briefly to nod out a sort of apology. But rather than ponder all that out, I instead return us back to the start of my story, which was a journey taken only so that you would believe me now when I tell you as follows. One that stands before you here today, one who would take the vow of constancy, eternity, and servitude before their family and the law and your God alike. One of them was the one I watched wait just beyond the fire until the line of brides, bridegrooms, groom brides, and the rest dwindled, the wick of wedders flickering like the last stub of a candle in a warlock's fundament as the dawn rises. And then that one finally approached the devil and knelt before him and said, Devil, make me yours too. But the devil leaned back, and a puzzled look spread across his old goat's eyes to see this stranger, untouched by the revel, but apparently still set on asking for his hand. And he asked why? Why would this one, who had not joined in the celebration's frolic and fornication, but stood outside the warmth of the fire, watching all night, want to marry the devil? But while the devil found himself quite appealing, the one who came to ask his hand seemed to find him rather frightening. And so the devil descended from his wooden throne and squatted down level with the poor soul who had come to him, and whispered into their ear, Tell me true, why would one come to marry the devil? And the one before him, the same one who now stands before you, whispered back, For I am to be married within the month, and I would not, for I love them not. And if I will marry not for love, I may as well marry the devil. To which the devil could only respond by once again rocking back on his waxy haunches, and there was a silence in the air, like the moment between when the lightning strikes and when the thunder gives its belated warning to the one who has been struck. And the woman with the dark braids puts her hand to her heart. I thought the devil would smite the one dead, or shout, or laugh, or otherwise terribly upend that pregnant moment, but instead the devil slowly nodded, then reached his hands up to the top of his great furred skull and opened his skin, pulling away the old horned goat as if it were a costume, and it fell to the ground, and in the pool of the raiment of the devil was just a little fellow, smooth and dark as a shadow, who reached out his hand and took the one's hand and said, let us walk for a moment. And so walk they did, and away from the throne by the fire. And out of fear or respect, I stayed back and heard not what they said, but I watched as the devil, in his smaller, softer form, wiped a tear from the one's eye, and then, to what seemed his surprise, found a matching tear rolling down his own cheek, to which the one before you raised their hand and wiped it from him, so that they both stood there holding each other's tears, then clasped them together hand in hand, and returned to the place where the devil's skin and frock coat and horns lay on the ground, and your one helped the devil put them back on, slipping them on like a robe or a gown, with the one tying them up and back, and the devil himself adjusting his horns on the top of his head, then bowing down to eye level. And here they were once again close enough that I could make out what the devil said, and he said, then we have a compact, a deal, a union, not one of marriage, but of friendship. And I give you my blessing that you need not marry man, nor woman, nor devil, but have of yourself to yourself for as long as you shall. But in making this union, this deal, this compact, you must promise that you will assert yourself and your freedom. For you have also asked that I safeguard it, and I will always do so if you but say the word. But if I must come and take you back, if I must be the one to do the dirty work of your freedom, I shall, but it shall not be a pretty sight. Upon which the devil asked if your one agreed, and your one said they did. And yet now I have come here today to find them thus, and your one with the fearful eyes and yet still silent, their very freedom, which has been vouchsafed by the devil himself, buried to submission beneath the whips of pageantry and chains of expectation? Now, the damning finger of the woman's hand points to the couple before the crowd, both of them trembling as their assembled families and further attendees murmur among themselves, which one is it? Or her, surely. Him, of course. Both, neither. Doesn't matter so long as the devil's involved. When Herman Gorglot finally breaks from his seat, as if from a cell, and stamps up to the front and grabs the woman with the dark hair by her long braid wrapped in green silk, and bellows in her face with spittle flecking like a high wind, as he demands to know who she is to come in here. This stranger, who purports to be but an innocent lurker at the devil's night of weddings, who comes now to interrupt this holiest of days, this most sanctified of ceremonies, this union of business and family, and also a commitment of love between man and woman and God. Yes, love. But at that word love, the woman howls with laughter, doubling over to wrench her braid from Gorglut's hand, leaving only the empty winding of green silk in his grasp like the skin shed by a serpent, before she rises again with her loose hair now draped before her face like a black curtain, and she speaks from the darkness behind. That is a funny way to put it, sir, for I believe that the one I refer to is not the only one who may have secrets here before us, as perhaps others in attendance would agree. For if I had stayed out until dawn, whether that night or another, just so out in that field, I wonder who else of you I might have seen as the bonfires blazed, or else in the gray ash of dawn when they smoldered. Which of you witnesses here I would have seen, exhausted and drifting towards slumber, sated with your backsides red and bellies full, glowing like coals with the devil's sweet wine, and the cakes, sweet cream, salted meats, mound of frosting, like a stone in the stomach of a swimmer? Which of you I could find rising, or at least rolling, back across the trampled flattened grass and straw where just the night before the devils, witches, warlocks, hobgoblins, hydra-bone jackies, unquiet dead, silent familiars, and further odd hosts had pounded down the stems in their fervor, heading back home to their unsuspecting spouses, betrothed, parents, children, congregations? But oh, sir and father, to speak of love, love in a place as this dry and dusty chapel, and on a day such as this, is incongruous and has the bitter taste of a divine word placed into a profane mouth that chews over the verb that resists conjugation and spits it out before the stunted altar like a hard, bitter nut of a noun, proper, inviolable, intractable, untouchable. Yes, untouchable. For what have you to say here of love before families that would shackle one to another against their will before a God that is so far above and beyond you, all that he is like a small tallow lamp in the rafters of a barn, barely seen, never felt, and nothing more than a distant but mortal danger should he ever deign to fall to the straw-covered earth? What have you to say when you know what a difference it is from the love at the Sabbath, which existed beyond all tenses, beyond all objects, direct and indirect alike, attached to, flowing over and around, covering people, places, things, ideas, actions, and everything else without reserve, in the same way the village's river rises from its banks during the millennial flood and destroys the houses and the mill and washes over the parish cemetery to clear away the rotten dead, but having swept away the debris, leaves behind new and fresh shapes rearranged in the fertile loam. And it is that kind of love, Or so I'm only guessing, the woman says as she takes a breath and sweeps back her hair to reveal eyes flashing redder than blood or fire or shame. For ye like you, good people here gathered today, I know nothing of that wildness that sets flames across the fields, that kind of love of something more that led our one here to approach the devil and make a promise, and for the devil to promise in return that he would safeguard that freedom with love, but only if that one would claim for themselves in front of, and it was me, the one before the altar cries, I do not thee wed. And the strange woman laughs, and flames rise from the floorboards. And now the devil will keep his promise. The end.
Excellent, Gordon. Thank you. I have to say, like, first, as an author, I am in awe that you gave yourself a challenge of writing a 4,000 word story all as one sentence. And you pulled it off very well. And you can read it very well. So amazing. Woo!
Wonderful
And
performance.
as,
Yeah.
yeah. And as a reader,
Thank you.
like, it was just a lot of fun to take in. I mean, very New England Hawthorne fun imagery that you're putting in front of us. I enjoyed it all.
Well,
Um,
I thank you very much for giving me an opportunity to do it. I think it really works better when somebody's reading it out loud. So I'm glad more people get to see it this way.
I also have to my final thing at the moment is as a host, I also realized that I did not read your bio, which is why I surprised you too fast in turning it over to you in the beginning. So I will go ahead and do that now before we transition to reader number two. Um, so now that we have heard Speak Now or Take In Gordon's amazing background, Gordon B. White is a Seattle based author of horror and weird fiction. His fiction has been nominated for the Shirley Jackson and Bram Stoker Awards, and his stories, reviews, and interviews have appeared in dozens and dozens of venues. With multiple short story collections and novellas, his most recent book is the short story collection. Gordon B. White is creating haunting, weird horrors. You can find him online at www.gordonbwhite.com and on most social media as at Gordon B. White. Thank you so much, Gordon. We
Thank
are
you so much
glad
for having me.
we're glad to have you here. I am starting thoroughly entertained. So now for our second half today, we have the author Somto Ihezue. Somto is an MFA fellow in creative writing at the University of Maryland. His writing has appeared in Clarkesworld, Poetry Magazine, Uncanny Magazine, Strange Horizons, Beneath Ceaseless Skies, Flash Fiction Online, and others. His work has received residencies and fellowships from the Kimmel Harding Nelson Center for the Arts, Tin House, Clarion West, Sitka Center for Art and Ecology, Sundress Academy for the Arts, and more. He was assistant editor of the publishing Taught Me anthology from the Science Fiction and Fantasy Writers of America and the National Endowment for the Arts, and co-editor of Will This Be a Problem, the anthology. Somto, come to the fire and tell us your tales.
Hello, everyone. I'll be reading from my short story titled Parts, Littlings, and Holy Things. Content notes: the story contains references to child endangerment. Beads of sweat trailed down Orlado's body, drenching the goat fodder where she lay sprawled. She had bitten hard into the pad of leather clenched between her teeth. Her incisors now grazed against each other. Her goats just stared at her, silent. Orlado pushed, harder, her body quivering under the screams she was stifling. This was her third pregnancy. With the previous ones, she'd had the midwives dabbing her with a cold towel. This time, hidden away in a barn, a candle dying out beside her, all she had was her strength. With a deep inhale, she pushed again, and when she felt her head tearing through, she looked over, making sure the child slipped gently onto the fodder. and as she had feared, the other came pushing too. Oledo had felt it for months, written and kicking inside her. Every night, she had prayed to Allah, to her mothers, to take it away. They did not. The second child slipped out, wet and blooded, next to its sibling. Sedated by the pinch of snakeweed she'd taken every day for the past week, the twins slept, still as a lake. The little ones looked like Oledo's mother, and all her brothers, and all her sisters. If their eyes had been open, this is how Oledo would describe them: owl eyes, bronze eyes, sailing eyes. Oledo cut the children's cords. With a cloth, she strapped them to her chest. At first, she staggered again and again. Then she ran. Outside the barn, the moon stole behind clouds, and the stars had forgotten what it meant to shine. For the darkness, Oledo was thankful. She made for the main hut, the one she shared with Nadi, and found him bent over a fire, breaking palm kernels. In the firelight, the man's skin was the sheen of tarnished trinkets. He did not see her, not until the light from the flames caught her shadow. I woke and you were gone. Nadi stood, his eyes going to the bundle on her chest. Oledo pulled at the cloth, revealing the faces of the little ones. It is time. Her voice was a thing unbowed, a river unparched in drought. We must hurry. You should have woken me. Nadi's eyes did not stray from the children. There was no time. Oledo let her impatience bleed into the words. You would have slowed me down. Nadi was one to cuddle, to linger. There was no room for it. There was no time. Oledo unbundled one of the twins. She undid her woolen scarf and swaddled the infant in it. Then she placed the child in the Nadi's hands. The man just stared down at it. A tremble came finding his hands. This was the first of his children he had held. He did not touch the others. They did not let him. The infant nuzzled into him, and the warmth found the corners of Nadi's body. It was like holding light. We have to go. Oledo turned to leave, and in the darkness she found Azoka. The woman was still, a shadow on an ill-lit street. Azoka, Nadi stepped forward, shielding Oledo with his towering frame. It was too late. Azoka had already seen. I heard noises. Azoka was a liar. Everyone knew this. She once spread word she'd seen Carlo, the potmaker, holding back rain. At the time, the village had been besieged by famine. The river birds broke and crackled under the sun. The leaves wilted down the trees. People were erratic with hunger, and Azuka's lies had taken root with ease. Carlo was strung up that day. Oledo and Nadi lived on the outskirts of the village. No one could have heard a thing unless they wanted to. After Oledo's second pregnancy, they had moved there and steered clear of everyone. But Azoka was a mango fly, ever prying, ever hovering. Azoka's eyes darted from the child in Nadi's arm before straining to catch the bundle strapped to Oledo's chest. Gods, not again. She cupped the words as tears fled down her face. Azoka, Nadi tried to hush the woman. It was pointless. The woman's voice found the night wind and kited higher, higher. Oledo hated it. The crying, the mourning. She hated being treated like tragedy made an eternal abode of her home. For all her misfortunes, Oledo had wept for herself. She had wept for days on end. It was enough. There would be no more weeping in her house. I have to tell the elders. Azuka wiped her running nose, nodding and agreeing with herself. Azuka, please, listen to me. Nadi tried to reach for her. The woman drew back. We are leaving the village. No one needs to know. Where are you going? Azuka seemed to mellow. Nadi trailed on as he explained the details of their departure. Once they completed the crossing ritual, they would all be safe, and the rest of the village would never know. Azuka became rather calm, listening with a sincerity, a keenness. Oledo hated that too. When Nnadi was done, Azuka reached for him, gently squeezing his arm. She had initially gone for his hands, but the baby slept in them. I can help. This is how it happened. Azuka was standing. Azuka was falling. Azuka was breathing. Azuka was wrestling air. Nnadi did not see it happen. There was no seeing of it. Oleido became night and befell her cousin like a curse. In her hand, a blade, and the blade came cutting. Blood splashed across Nnadi's face. The man inhaled once. Blood splashed across Oleido's face. There was nothing to inhale. Oleido slew her cousin with the blade that cut her children's cords. Azuka did not die screaming. For that, Oleido was thankful. The woman had collapsed to her knees, her hands reaching for the gash, her hands gathering her blood like harvest. Oleido watched her, a child watching a grasshopper struggle in a puddle. In her dying, Azuka made to speak and failed, the words flooding back into her lungs. Whatever those words were, Oleido knew they would be lies. Oleido, Nadi's voice was afraid. What have you done? I have lost. Oleido stopped, exhaling for the first time that night. I will not do it again. She had children too. Oleido said nothing. She was your blood, and now she is dead. She turned to face Nnadi. In her eyes, Nnadi found her. This was her, the woman she had always been, the woman he married. Ardent, true, raging. Nnadi made to kneel to the body. He was unsure where to begin, not with the child in his hands. Leave it, Oleido called from behind him. It will not be the first body I have buried. And so they ran through the cornfields, past the giant Odala tree. When Oleido was born, her mother buried her placenta at the foot of the Odala tree, just as her grandmother had done, just like all the mothers before her had done. Oleido was never allowed to bury any of hers, lest they cursed the land. Wait, Oleido went back to the tree, her breath falling in short gasps. She knelt to its roots, resting her head against its trunk. It was the first time in a long time she knew rest. Oleido started to dig. She tore at the soil, debris stabbing her fingers. She clawed and clawed, stones bruising her knuckles. Nnadi knelt to help, balancing the child in one arm. Oledo did not let him. This was her digging. They never let me bury the others. Oledo stopped. From her clothes, she retrieved a bundle wrapped in pawpaw leaves. She had collected it right before she left the barn. They called me sacrilege. Gently, she placed the bundle in the hole and pushed the sand back over it. Where are they to stop me now? This time, when Nnadi helped her, she let him. His hands followed the motion of her hands, like water finding water. Nnadi had always followed Oledo everywhere. When they were children, he followed her to watch the spirits dance in the warm streams. He followed her to the neighboring village to steal a goat. He followed her to the height of the Iroko trees to catch stars. And when she yelled and tried to wrestle him away, he would knock her to the ground, rather gently, again and again. So Oledo let him wander after her. She soon found herself following him too. They got older, and she found she wanted to wrestle him in other ways. There was something about the curve of his buttocks. When Nnadi caught her watching him, Oledo would not look away. Nnadi would kick sand in her direction, and she would lunge at him, mostly at his buttocks. When she came of age, they readied Oledo to join the other girls in the maiden dance. The dance was a ceremony. Young men would gather in the village square to watch the girls sway and twirl, to find brides. Oledo's mother had danced, as her grandmother had done, as had all the mothers who came before her. Oledo refused to dance. Why don't they dance for me like the birds do? This she had said. Then she went to her father's farm and plucked the largest coconut. The next day, when the sun painted the waters, Oledo found Nnadi and shoved the coconut into his hands. She betrothed him. The elders rebuked her. The elders scorned her. A woman does not betroth a man, they said. Oledo did not care. But the fight in Oledo waned with the birth of the first twins. From the moment she took in, Oledo was certain the pregnancy would kill her. She was convinced of it when two of her molars came loose. She had been swallowing pounded yam, and they just came tumbling out. Her hair was next. It left in painful tufts until she was bald. One morning, Oledo woke up, and it was pitch black. But she'd heard the cock crow and welcome morning. Not many things frightened Oledo. This did. When the medicine man tried to line her eyes with rabbit feces, she slapped his hand away. You will never see again, he had cursed. I will, she spat back. When her sight returned, in gratitude, Oledo poured daily libations to the ancestors for a month. Oledo also spent the pregnancy hating Nnadi. She hated that he was happy and beautiful while she suffered. Her nose was the size of an avocado. The sight of him filled her with bile. She would stare daggers at the poor man until he fled from her sight. His scent physically made her nauseous too. Above all, she hated that she still wanted him to hold her each night. When she went into labor and the children came, Oledo was relieved to be alive. Then the midwives gasped and scattered back. Some ran out of the room screaming. Her relief faded away. Worry took its place. In between battling pangs of labor pain and fearing for her life, Orlando had forgotten what it meant to birth twins. When one of the midwives spat the word, Morjaw, demon, only then did it dawn on her. Orlando thought the children were ugly, like the hairless sparrow hatchlings that nested in her mother's mango tree. Their faces were red and puffy, like baby rodents, healed together. They were ugly, but they were hers, and she would not part with a hair on their head, not one strand. When they came for the children, they came with dirges and salt. Orlando met them with bared teeth. The first priest who reached for the babies found a dagger in his shoulder. The second one found teeth where teeth should not be. But in the end, Orlando was one woman. They took the children, and she screamed for 10 days. It echoed through the village, grief calling. The village folk thought the screaming would kill her. It did not. When the second birth came, Orlando met it silent. She did not touch the children. She did not look at them. When they took the little ones, she did not fight. Orlando was tired. People began to call her an adulterous witch, like being just a witch was not enough. They said she had spawned with demons. The village had not seen the birth of twins in decades, so Orlando was utterly alone in her misery. She did not speak for months. Her hair tangled and fallowed. She ate nothing, willing death to take her, and death came and found there was nothing to take. Orlando's family abandoned her. Her father, her brothers, and all her sisters. You stray from us, and we stray from you. This is what they said. If her mother had been alive, Orlando knew she'd never stray from her. Her husband's kin were not one for words. A line of powerful Dibias, they were not ones to be crossed. They found Nadi another woman to marry. Nadi refused. They paid her dowry without him present. Nadi refused. They moved her into his matrimonial home. He shared with Orlando. Nadi rained fire. And his kinsmen rained fire too. So Orlando packed her things and left for the outskirts, and Nadi followed her. Nadi and Orlando stopped running when they came upon gravestones. It was the resting place of Nadi's ancestors. The children were starting to wake. The first child, the one strapped to Orlando, yawned, stretching up against her. Even in the dimness of near dawn, Orlando thought it was the most beautiful, most hallowed thing she would ever see. She turned to find Nadi gaping into the distance. What are you waiting for? She asked in a hushed scream. Begin the ritual. What if we went south, up Itajali Hill? What if Isigini? It wasn't confusion etched into the creases on Orlando's forehead. It was apprehension. There is no running from this. No village will welcome us. Our children will be slain on sight. We do not know where this path leads. Nadi took 2 small steps back. My father was the last of my kinfolk to make the crossing. We never saw him again. We know it leads away from here. That is all that matters. In every generation, the path opened up to a traveler from the Ihedioha clan, wielders of fire. Nnadi belonged to that clan. A few travelers in times past had returned, spinning tales about a world of distant colors, of fireflies trapped in glass, of steel horses, of blackened roads of tar. In this world, the houses were not of mud and raffia. In this world, they touched the sky. In this world, spirits did not roam amongst men. In this world, twins lived. That was enough for Oledo. When she took in the third time, the fight in her returned, and she hatched a plan to hijack the crossing ritual. Nadi was not next in line. Neither was he the most spiritually attuned member of his clan. So, Oledo helped him prepare. It took years of dedicated edification for one to make the crossing. Oledo and Nnadi had months. In the passing weeks, they performed the rites of rebirth, the rituals of the sojourner. For to walk this path is to wade through fire. Every first market day, Oledo washed Nnadi in the hot streams of the Afo. His body burning through the waters reminded her of their childhood, how he'd follow her to splash in those very waters. Back then, the water did not scald. The night when the path spoke, Oledo would balance a calabash of bat wings on Nnadi's head and have him wander naked into the wilds. She silently prayed he did not get torn to shreds by night leopards. Before the ones who died before you, be bare, take flight. Between bathing in steaming waters and getting slashed by leopards, Nadi's nights became long, damp, and terrifying. But Oledo was there. She held on to him. For the final rites, beneath the glow of a broken moon, Oledo slew a goat, its body thrashing beneath her knee. She doused Nnadi in its blood and pushed him into the Ore depths. The fall could have killed him. It did not. Ancestors past had come walking through him, filling him with might. When Nnadi emerged from the stones, it was spirit fire that coursed through his bones. Their plan hinged on Nnadi, and now he was wavering. Oledo would make the crossing herself, but the crossing only ferried Nnadi's kin. Oledo looked out into the distance. Pinpricks of light told her morning was coming. In no time, the sun will set the sky on fire. It all fell to her now. If you have forgotten what awaits us come dawn, let me remind you. She drew close to Nnadi, breathing his air. As they did the others, they will tear these ones from us and banish their lifeless bodies to the wastelands of Akacha. If we run to the ends of the earth, they will follow. They will not stop until our children are no more. Do you understand? She peered into his eyes. Their golden brown hue softened in the dark. Then we kill them, Nnadi shot back. We kill all of them. In the mountain wars, Nnadi had rained terror on the Ogidi raiders, ripping their bodies to bone and dust. An Ihedioha warrior, he was formidable. Oledo knew this, the same way she knew it would not be enough. Nnadi, her hand went to his face, her fingers lost in his beard. The village will rally against us. We would be outnumbered. I cannot leave you here with these people. I will be all right. I promise. I will be just one woman with one child. Oledo caressed his arms with a tenderness. There was no time for it. There was no room for it. But if tenderness was what Nadi needed to forge on, she would give it to him. And when they ask of me, you went into the wild and never came out, Oledo smiled, just like we agreed. Still, Nadi lingered. What is it? The words broke out of her. Oledo did not have the luxury of breaking. Tell me, I cannot I cannot live in a world where you do not exist. Nadi shook his head, his voice crumbling, the way it always did when his heart grew too heavy in his chest, his body racked with tears. You can, I promise. Oledo wiped at his tears, but they came anyway. She brought her forehead to his, the babies a space between them, a space too little, for his tears still found her cheeks. You must, she squeezed out of his tight grip, and Nadi fell to his knees, the child steady in his hands. He began the crossing ritual, binding into the bone of his ancestors. Allah, mother of my mothers, Nadi called to the winds, consume me with your spirit. Amadioha, the echo that is thunder, come, see the bones that bind us. Ikenga, forge me into steel, let me fell mountains. Anyanwụ, light our paths with fire and day. Ekwensu, be my shadow, take us to a place far, a time near. And they were gone, Nadi and the child. Oledo, alone on the gravestones, with nothing but the memory of them, cooed to the baby in her hands, who started to cry. And Oledo cried. Thank you. Yeah.
Ooh, take a second, soak that in. That it's hard to call a story that's that rough glorious, but it's glorious. You just have to. The language is beautiful. Oh, it's a lot. Aledo, man, she's
Yeah,
a fighter. She's
yeah,
fierce. She's
Yeah.
yeah.
fierce. Um, I think oftentimes in Story Hour, there's a little bit of a connection between the stories. And I feel like for these two, that kind of ended up being rites of passage that are twisted. And we learn along the way what it is that is so twisted about it as we go, even though their tones were very, very different, obviously. But they both kind of went along with that for me. And I greatly enjoyed them both. Thank you so much for sharing. Um, Let me share the readers for next week's Story Hour. They are Kemi Ashin Giwa and Meg Elison. If you are planning to join us again, and I hope everybody is planning to join us again, make sure that you go by the storyhour2020.com website, just in case there's a last minute author substitution or something like that. And also on the website is great information on the author guests who are coming up next. And if you would like to listen to replays of this very episode and any of the episodes over the last 6 years of Story Hour, 6 years, you can go to youtube.com and the channel is Story Hour 2020. Once again, thank you, Somto and Gordon, for sharing your stories with us tonight. We feel them. Man, I'm just imagining the work that went into both of them too, as an author for sure. Well done, well done. We'd also like to thank the St. Sifwa for the Givers Fund grant that helps the show keep streaming online. And thank you to Daniel Marcus for starting it all, and to Laura Blackwell for helping it all run so smoothly over the years. And once again, thank you to our audience. You give us the reason to be here.